marriage supper of the Lamb. Is the marriage supper of the Lamb in heaven before we come back to earth? Or do we return to earth and we have the marriage supper of the Lamb when Jesus sets up the kingdom down here? So this is, then a lot of theologians have gone back and forth on this. I am pretty sure, not a lot, but I'm pretty sure that it's on earth. And I'll tell you why. We're going to look through a few verses here and kind of pick them apart and see what you think about it. Does it matter? I think it does, because when Jesus comes back down, Zechariah chapter 14, when he returns to the earth and the mountain splits or Mount Olive splits in half, and we come back with him. If we are looking for the marriage supper of the Lamb, after that, then we are coming back. It's kind of like the bride is coming with the groom to the marriage supper. That thing we talked about with the Galilean marriage thing, the situation. Well, there's those that say, no, it's, we are actually married to Christ in heaven, and then we have the marriage supper of the Lamb, and then we come down to earth and occupy down here. Okay, now as we are going through this, you can look at all the information and you can vote which way you think it is. Let's go to Matthew chapter 26, verses 29 on your paper. It says this in Matthew 26, Jesus said, "But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until that day that I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." So in my way of thinking, okay, the kingdom really doesn't start until he's here, and he's going to be drinking the juice in the kingdom. And so can you kind of get a sense of where I'm heading on this? I'm thinking this must be the marriage supper of the Lamb is on earth, because it's during the kingdom that he's going to drink this juice. I don't think, and I could be wrong, this is speculation, but if it was in heaven, would we have the juice in heaven? Certainly God can make juice, and we could have the marriage supper up there. But it seems as though it's saying it's going to be in the kingdom when we drink the juice. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. The second one, Jesus said in Luke 22, "For I say unto you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God shall come." So I believe it must be on the earth, because the fruit of the vine is on the earth. So I know it's not an exact thing, but it's kind of maybe kind of. And then Luke 12, of course. "And ye yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord, when he will return from the wedding, that when he cometh and knocketh, they may open unto him immediately. Blessed is that servant whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Verily I say unto you, that he will gird himself and make them to sit down to meat, and will come forth and serve them." That sounds a lot like on earth. That, to me, sounds a lot like on earth. Because he says, return from the wedding. When he comes and knocks, they may open to him immediately. I can't imagine we're in heaven and we're going to have the marriage supper, and Jesus is going to knock at the doors of our mansions in heaven and say, "Come to the wedding feast." That just doesn't seem to fit with my way of thinking. But if you disagree with me, you're in pretty good company with some guys that they think it's going to be on earth. Okay, Matthew 22. This is probably one of the key ones. Matthew 22, 11 and 14. "Cast out into the darkness And talking about those that come in, and I guess I didn't get the whole rest of that verse, where it talks about somebody without the wedding garment. And the Father says, well, you don't have the wedding garment, cast him out into the outer darkness. And there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Only the called and the chosen are given the privilege to attend the wedding feast. So where do the unqualified go if it's in heaven? If they're to be cast out into outer darkness, that doesn't seem to fit with being in heaven. You know, like there may be a dark place in heaven or something. It seems like that fits on earth. That fits when we come back to the earth and somebody comes without the wedding garment. Is everybody familiar with that? Talk about the wedding garment thing? Let's go there. Because I didn't get all the passages. I must have not copied it right. Matthew 22, verses 11 to 14. It's important to get some of these, especially this one. Matthew 22. Talking about 11, it says, and when the king came in to see the guests, it's talking about a wedding feast. Up in verse 10, the wedding was furnished for all the guests. So we're talking about the wedding feast. And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man which had not the wedding garment. So he had a garment, but it wasn't the wedding garment. So apparently, there are two different garments. There's the robe of righteousness that we get in heaven. When we get our new body, we get the robe of righteousness, which is the righteousness of Christ. But remember we talked about in Revelation chapter 3, I think it was, where it says that buy from me, I think it was the church at Thyatira, that you be not naked, but you get the robe of righteousness. Well, it's naked isn't talking about stark naked. It's talking about just having this linen garment, the outer or the inner garment. Kind of like if you're walking around the house and it's cold out, you put a robe over your garment. And that's what this is. That you have a white robe over top of your white gown underneath. The white gown is the righteousness of Christ. Everybody gets that. Every believer gets the righteousness of Christ. But the outer garment is called a robe. And that is because of a reward. That's a reward that you get that. Okay? And that, I think, is what he's talking about here. How did you get in this wedding feast without having the right garment, the wedding garment? So, throw him out. Well, if this is in heaven, how does an unsaved guy get into the wedding feast in heaven?
How was an unsaved guy get to heaven?
Yeah, how did he get there to begin with? But it would make sense if it was down on the earth, and we all return with Christ. We're going to see this. We all return on white horses and land on earth and everything. And it would make sense that at that time, some of them people will not have any righteous acts, which is the robe. We have the robe of Christ's righteousness, but they won't have any righteous acts to qualify them to go into the marriage supper of the Lamb. Does that make sense? That's kind of a little, we think of, aren't we all forgiven? Aren't we all? Yes, we're all forgiven. And we're all given the robe of righteousness. The Bible talks about that. But there is another robe, a covering over what's called the tunic. That tunic, that outer robe, is our righteousness, is that we have worked at and a reward. It's a reward to be able to get that. That's why it talks about the church at Thyatira. Don't come in, don't be found naked before the Lord. It's not talking about stark naked. It's talking about not having this outer garment of obedience. You remember when he was doing this first 7 churches, and it says the blessed is the overcomer, and they get this, and the overcomer gets that. It's an overcomer garment. Let's put it that way. Make sense that way? Not everybody's going to get it. So some people are not going to be allowed into the marriage feast because they were not, let me put it that way, they were not overcomers. Okay?
They weren't dedicated and yielded to.
Yes,
Not
yeah,
obedient.
yeah. And you know, I was just reading 1 Corinthians chapter 3 where it talks about that our works will be tried by fire. You know, and and everybody doesn't get everything in the Christian church. If you have wood, hay, and stubble, it burns up. Gold, silver, precious stones, we will receive a reward. But if anybody doesn't have, they go off into heaven. They get into heaven, no problem with heaven and hell, but there is a problem with the reward. And this marriage supper of the Lamb, when he tells us here in Matthew 22, talks about throw the guy out that doesn't have the garment. It's not talking about somebody that's naked. It's talking about somebody that doesn't have this outer tunic, this overcomer tunic, this reward tunic. Okay? Is that much clear? Okay. Thank you, Carlisle. I see somebody. Yeah, okay. But this is where some Bible teachers differentiate. Here, Revelations 19, 1 through 6, if you look at your paper, is about all the saints in heaven praising God at the wedding, and the supper is mentioned in verses 7 through 10. So it's like they're in heaven rejoicing, and then 7 through 10 is talking about the supper. So, and then in verse 11 through 14, it shows Christ's return. So you see the problem there? If I look at Revelations 19, this particular passage, this, what is it, 1 through 14, if I look at that whole passage and I say this is in chronological order, this is the way it goes. There's the marriage supper, or there's the marriage in heaven, then there's the marriage supper, and then Christ returns down here. That would make me think that the marriage supper must be in heaven, right? So you can vote which way you want to go there. But there's the sequence here. Now, there are some Bible teachers, and I agree with them, that when it says the marriage supper of the Lamb, and then right after that we have the fact that Christ is returning to the earth, and we're going to get into that in just a minute, that actually that marriage supper of the Lamb is part of a explanation. It's not in chronological order. It's an explanation of what's going to happen. But it's not in chronological order. So you can see the little difficulty there. You may be eating your marriage supper of the Lamb dinner in heaven, or you may wait and get it on earth.
We'll just be thankful to be there today.
We'll be there. We'll be there again. Yeah. Verse 10. This is very important. I put down verse 10 because I think that we're getting into the real. This is the culmination of Christ's ministry and what he has decided he's going to do with this earth. He's going to be the king of this earth. You ever wonder why, the Lord of the Rings came out, got so important, and Chronicles of Narnia by these guys? These were Christian guys, and they wrote this stuff as an analogy for Christ coming to this earth to be king. The Lord of the Rings, one of the last things, trilogy they had, is the return of the king. Of course they got, monsters and creatures doing all this stuff, but the whole analogy is that there is a king coming, and Christ is coming to this earth. And think about how many people that are overcomers today. We are in a very small minority. very small minority. And we have a conquering king that's coming. That it doesn't matter if we outnumber the opponents 100 to 1, or if they outnumber us 1,000,000 to 1. It doesn't matter, because our king is coming. He's going to reign. And it's really, this is the culmination, I feel, the culmination of the scriptures right here in chapter 19. This verse 10 through verse 14, we're going to see our part. Our part is going to be really important. When people talk about, when we get to heaven, we're going to be talking with Jesus and doing this kind of stuff and everything. Well, yeah, they don't really put a Bible verse with it a lot of times. I want to know what's going to happen. What am I going to get? In 1 Corinthians it says that he has prepared for us a body. Just a short little word. We have a body in heaven. You got a body in heaven that looks, well, I don't know if it looks just like you right now, but you've got a body that's reserved in heaven for you. It's in heaven. We don't go up there and float around as spirits. Our souls go up there and dwell a body. A body in heaven. And then when we come back, when Christ comes back to this earth, this body that's in the grave is metamorphosized and turned into a body that we have for eternity. But, in heaven, we're not just floating around spirit creatures. We are residing in a body. And it's important to remember stuff like that. And I've often thought, some of these sci-fi movies and stuff, they'll show a whole list they'll have a whole bunch of bodies out there, and they're going to be doing something to this bad person and say, where do all these bodies come? Well, we're saving them. We're going to put, it's kind of like, I know it's a far stretch, but it's kind of like the stuff that if we look at our body now, God made us to be in a body, not to be floating around. So when we die and our spirit is carried by the angels to heaven, we have a body. It's a couple of things that are missing. One is blood. We will not have blood in our new body. Carlotta said, hope we're not fat, too. I resemble that remark, Carlotta. Okay, I kind of deviate a little bit there. Let's go to verse 10 on your paper. This is very important. Let me read verse 10. His disciples say unto him, if the case of a man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry.
You're not in Revelations,
I'm in Matthew.
You're still in Matthew.
Oh. That didn't sound right. Okay, John is saying, he says, I fell on my face to worship him. This angel's telling him something. And he said unto me, see thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. There's some churches center on that little phrase, the spirit of let me read it again. How did I get off of that chapter? The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. To me, being a prophecy teacher, to me, this says, amen. You've got to teach prophecy. You've got to. The spirit of Jesus is prophecy. It's prophecy is wrapped up in it. Christ has given us prophecy. If we don't teach, if I don't teach, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Is prophecy important? Absolutely. This is what the Bible just makes it very plain. It's the spirit of prophecy is Jesus, the testimony of Jesus. So if I'm giving the testimony of Jesus to somebody, and I don't give any prophetic stuff in there, I'm kind of missing a big part. I'm not saying people can't get saved, but it's a big part of the ministry of Christ is prophecy. And we dare not, belittle that. Prophecy is super important. Okay? And then I put down underneath it, any proper teaching about Jesus must of necessity contain prophecy. Any proper teaching about Jesus must, I believe this with all my heart, that it must contain some prophecy. I'm not saying all prophecy, but it must have some prophecy. Any teaching of prophecy, Dr. Hawking says, any teaching of prophecy that takes our minds and our hearts away from Him, Jesus, is not being properly communicated. So all prophecy has to point to Jesus. And any time we're speaking of any teaching of Jesus, we need to have some prophetic information in there. And you'd be hard-pressed to teach anything out of the Scripture that doesn't have something about prophecy. It's throughout. It's pregnant with it throughout Scripture. But I've heard and I've listened on different messages and everything. I've heard people that they'll go through a series of several messages and everything and never mention anything about prophecy. Well, the Spirit of Jesus, or the testimony of Jesus, is the Spirit of prophecy. It's got to be there, or it's a big-time empty hole. And perhaps that's one of the reasons that in our Christian communities nowadays that we're not seeing any big revivals in this country, because there's no teaching of prophecy. Did you know that Israel is important in the Old Testament and in prophecy? We need to know that. Man, we see. Well, I'm digressing again. Okay, let's go to verses 11 through 14. Here you go. Are you ready? This is heaven being open. 11 through 14. And I saw heaven open. So 3 times in the Bible, in Revelation, we see heaven opens. This is the third of the 3 times. I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. Remember a white horse? Has somebody seen in heaven before? Way back in, I think it was chapter 4, or was it chapter 5, the white horse? Chapter 5, there was the white horse, the red horse, the speckled horse, and the pale horse. Remember that? And the white horse there, the rider was carrying a bow with no arrows and everything, but he went forth to conquer and to conquer. This, and isn't that the way the devil does? He takes something of Jesus and kind of mimics it. He uses the white horse over there in chapter 5, and right here in chapter 19, this is Jesus. This is Jesus. And he doesn't need to go forth conquering and to conquer with the bow. He slays with the word of his mouth. And he that sat on him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he does judge and make war. Wow. Wow. When Jesus says, I'm going to judge righteously and I'm going to make war, it's not a whole lot of, you can't call the committee man or call the lawyer and say, hey, stand up here and defend me. He is a faithful and true judge. He's judging faithfully and true here. Verse 12, his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. I thought, well, it's not like this, where it says on his heads were many crowns. This is, I think I put it in there. You might want to look at it. The Greek word used for crowns here is a diadem, a crown of royalty and authority, not the Stephanos, the crown of achievement. So when you see something in the Bible that talks about crowns, you get, for righteous works, you get Stephanos. But Jesus gets a diadem because he is the king. He gets a diadem crown. We get a Stephanos crown of we did righteous works. Okay? So when Jesus has a crown, or what's it say? He has many crowns. It's talking about this diadem, which went around Roman emperors had, and they would have various stones in it. And these stones would indicate that I'm a king of Moab and Edom and, Philistia and England, and all these different. So it's many crowns. It's not a bunch of crowns stacked on top of each other. It's one of these diadems with many crown stones in them to indicate he's over everything. Okay, that's what this is. So people don't get too confused about that, because I remember as a kid thinking, how's he gonna have many crowns? You gonna walk around with, big old tall thing like cat in a hat kind of a thing with a bunch of stuff in it. And he had a name written which no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed in a vesture dipped in blood. Now, here is another big discussion about, is this vesture that's dipped in blood, is this the one that we found from a previous passage about the Battle of Armageddon? Remember that? And he got blood from his enemies that he was trampling at the Battle of Armageddon, and the blood's flowing to the bridle of the horses and everything at that battle. Is this that blood, or is this the blood of Jesus when he died for our sins? Is this his blood? There's a lot of, you get to decide that too, which way that is. So, is it marriage feast in heaven or on earth? Is this Jesus' blood on this garment, or is this the Battle of Armageddon, battle of humans? So, any thoughts? I kind of lean towards it's Jesus' blood. That's what I lean towards. Because it says he has a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God.
Yeah.
And I think that's his blood. He's displaying for us, for all eternity, this garment. This is what Jesus looks like. It's not the rendition that you see on some of the paintings and everything of Jesus walking around. Draw a picture of the guy with that looks like this, and you're getting closer to what Jesus is. He's got a vesture dipped in blood, eyes like fire. Okay, it says in verse 14. This is where I don't want to get into verse 14 yet. This is our part, verse 14. Let's follow the lesson. Verse 11. Verse 11 was talking about heaven was open. These are the two other times that heaven is open. Chapter 4, verse 7, or verse 1, it says, after this I looked, and behold, the door was open in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were a trumpet talking to me, which said, come up hither, and I will show you the things that must be hereafter. Chapter 4, verse 1, I believe, is talking about the rapture. But he sees heaven open. This is the first time we see heaven open in Revelation. Now, Revelation chapter 11, verse 19, it says, and the temple of God was opened in heaven. So we see John is looking up to heaven, and he sees the temple is open in heaven. And there was seen in his temple the ark of the testament, and there was lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. So when God opens heaven, stuff happens. Man, there's the rapture in chapter 4, and here in chapter 11, we see hail and thunderings and lightnings and everything. Chapter 15, verse 5, and after that I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of the temple of the testimony in heaven was opened. So we find out heaven's opened up again. So John is seeing several times, he's seeing an open door into heaven in Revelation. He's recorded. And it says, faithful and true, Jesus is the keeper of promises. Aren't you glad he's the keeper of promises? He promises us, if you ever get a chance, just kind of, as you're doing your own private Bible study, just make a little note with a P over to the side or something. Promises. He promises never to leave us nor forsake us. That's one of the great promises that I read. And then the white horse, it's not the white horse of Revelation chapter 6, verse 1. This is the faithful and true King Jesus. The guy in Revelation 6, verse 1 is the Antichrist. Okay? So, and there's Christians that get messed up with that. They'll start saying, well, it's a white horse here, white horse there. It's Jesus. No, there's two different instances of somebody riding a white horse. Jesus being one, and the Antichrist being another. Okay? Now we're going to find out that we come down to this earth also riding white horses. Who has never rode a horse before? Okay? Dawn, you might have to put a safety belt on you and to bring you down, but Jesus is going to have a white horse. You're going to ride a white horse. You know, as a kid, a lot of times you think of this stuff, well, heaven's way up there, and I got to ride a horse way down here. Well, the horse is probably going to be like this. So, what's going to keep me from falling off the front of the horse when it gets, you know, I mean, we're going to come down, like, or are we going to just float down? Or, you know, kids got all kinds. And I'm thinking, how does this work? And what if the guy next to me, you know, if his horse bumps into my horse? Because it's millions.
These are heavenly horses.
Heavenly horses.
I'll be running my horse into yours.
Yeah.
That's gonna get you out of the horse and begin with.
Yeah, and is there reins on it, or the Lord just says, jump on the horse, hang on the horn, and just ride? The horse is going to take you.
More, didn't say a saddle. So you're gonna run a horse, no saddle.
Well, there's got to be a saddle on the horse.
Why?
Bareback,
Right.
mane, you can hang on to the mane of the horse.
I could never ride a horse
Oh, I
bareback.
had to do that when I was little.
And besides that, you know, you can't, how do you get your legs to go around a horse when, you know,
Well, these are skinny horses, not work horses.
You'll have a handicap.
Oh. Okay, verses 12 and 13. Let's, I think, and his eyes would flame and he closed the vestige of 12 and 13. The king is coming. This is the climax of everything here. The king is coming now. It says in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9, but we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man. So Jesus has been, this is where it happens right here. He's crowned with glory and honor. Today, he's in heaven, crowned with glory and honor, but it's not before this world, but he's coming back to be crowned with glory and honor. That should, as Pastor Buznitz once said, if that doesn't get you excited, your wood's all wet. If that doesn't get you on fire for the Lord, your wood's all wet. Because, man, that's our King, the one we have been serving all this time. He's going to win. We are not losers. We are not, we're on the winning side. Now, take a look at this Isaiah passage. I want everybody to look at this. Because this is, to me, I thought, whoa, I didn't know this before. Isaiah chapter 64, verses 1 and 2. Oh, that thou wouldst rend the heavens, tear the heavens open, Isaiah says. I wish, Lord, that you would tear the heavens open, that thou wouldest come down, and the mountains might flow down at thy presence. Mountains are going to collapse down. As when the melting fire burneth, the fire causes the water to boil, to make thy name known to thine adversaries, that the nations may tremble at thy presence. Is that not Christ's return? That's, Isaiah is talking about the same thing we read in Revelation chapter 19. He's coming down, the mountains are going to melt. Wait a minute. You know, we're going to be seeing that. We're going to, with our eyes, we're going to see that. Jesus comes down and I don't know if you're gonna be in the front row of the procession, or if you're gonna be in the back or something, but we're gonna see the mountains melt. It doesn't say they shake around, they melt.
Well, the heavens are gonna melt too.
The what?
The heavens are gonna melt.
Yeah.
When you render something, you're gonna
Yeah.
melt.
Rends it wide open, rends it wide open. Okay, verse 14, this is our part. This gets even cooler. Chapter 19, verse 14, our part, here we come. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed with what? Fine linen. That is the righteousness of Christ, the linen of Christ. That is not the outer tunics, okay? That's talking about everybody gets the white linen, okay? White and clean. So, let's look at a few other passages that's going to talk about this. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 2. And this is one of the first passages I remember studying way back. And I thought, Jesus is coming back and he's going to stand on the Mount of Olives and crack it wide open? Wow. And it says, and all the army, all the saints with him. That means we're all coming back. Jesus is bringing us all back to earth, all at the same time, at this time. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 5. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azael. Yea, ye shall flee, like as ye fled, talking about the nation of Israel, that they will flee, those that are here on the earth during the tribulation, as ye fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. That's you. You can put your name right there. And all the saints with thee. You're going to come back to this work with Jesus. When somebody tells you, so-and-so died, and they're in heaven, they're going to be with Jesus forever and ever. That is not true. They're going to be in heaven forever and ever. At the longest possible time is going to be whatever time you die, and then the tribulation. Then you're coming back to this earth if you know Christ. You're not going to be in heaven forever and ever. This is the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and he brings all of his children back down here with him. And what are they riding on? White horses. And you know, I don't believe this is an allegory. Augustine used to say, everything's an allegory. You know, we can say this is talking about the Roman emperors going into Tyre and what they did and all of this crazy talk. This is actual what's going to happen. Jesus is going to have the marriage supper of the Lamb. If the wedding has taken place, it's, you know, Carlotta had that thing about the wedding. It's just excellent explaining that. Okay, let's go on. Jude chapter 1, verse 14. Now, Jude is that little tiny book, but Jude quotes Enoch. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints. Wow. You know, there's some saints that I really don't want to ride the horse right next to. Some real problem. You know any Christians that are real problem people? I think the Lord's got, it says he comes with his armies. Armies means sections. You know, there's the commanders here, and then there's the captains, and then there's the generals, and then there's the privates, and his armies. In other words, when Jesus returns, there will be categories. There will be armies, different groups of people. I guess I shouldn't say categories, but different groups. They'll come in armies. Perhaps that means, you know, those from Russia will be here, and those from America here. Perhaps it means that the males will be here, and the females will be there. I don't know. But he's coming back with his armies. I'm not so sure Penny is she's gonna want to ride double with me. She's not gonna want to ride.
She'll have a perfect body just like you.
She isn't gonna wanna ride a horse by herself, though. Okay, Psalms chapter 149, verses 6 through 9. If you don't get anything else out of this message today, look at this. This is awesome. Psalms 146, 6 through 9, it says, "Let the high praises of God be in their mouth, and the two-edged sword in their hand." Somebody's getting a sword? Somebody's using a sword to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people. To bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute upon them the judgment written, "This honor have all his saints." We're not just coming down here to follow the king. We're coming down here to avenge the king of those that are on the earth that are his adversaries. What's he say here? Man, we get to be actively involved in his judgments on this earth with the wicked people that are here. We're actively involved in that. You gotta,
I was thinking soldiers.
yeah. Kind of like the general's coming and these are his soldiers. And yeah, it seems as though, unless I'm seeing something or I'm not seeing something that's really here, but this passage appears to tell me all of the saints will be given the privilege of bringing this world. When Jesus comes, he says that we're going to rule and reign with him. This is part of the reign. So who do you want to tie up when you get back down here? Who do you want to throw in jail? Who do you want to go and get?
Well, it says we'll be ruling with a rod of iron.
Yeah,
Nations.
yeah. But we don't really think of it. You know, the Bible also says that we're going to judge angels. Know ye not that you will judge angels someday, Paul says. So we're going to get the job of judging an angel. And I think, okay, now, I know I'm kind of giving some of my theology and stuff here, but it'll be a little askew. But I believe that every church has an angel that is assigned to it. That's why in Revelation chapter 2 and 3, he says, "Write this to the angel of the church of Laodicea and the church of Ephesus," and everything. I believe every church has an angel. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 that women are to have this kind of dress and not pray with their head uncovered and all that kind of stuff. And it says, because of the angels. Just throws that out there. Why? Because of why do angels have anything to do with it? We have the responsibility of judging the angel. How can I judge an angel unless I know what that angel was supposed to do when he was here, and maybe he didn't do what he was supposed to do? And I think this is when we not only judge the adversaries of Christ on the earth, I think this is when we're going to judge angels too. Lord brings angel Billy Bob in and says, "This was the angel that was of your church. And what do you think? Did he do a good job?" "Well, no, he let this happen and this happened." You say, "Well, Billy Bob's not so good, don't give him it." But we are going to be judging angels. Not judging angels for heaven and hell, because Christ throws the demons and everything into hell, so it must be some type of a judgment that we have over angels. And I think it may be at this time, maybe at this same time, that we come down and we judge those in the world that are following the Antichrist, and we're coming down and Jesus is setting up his kingdom. He says the sword of his mouth goes out and slays the wicked, and we set up. Is it cold in here, Carlotta?
Yes.
It's freezing.
Very cold. Yeah. Well, let me quickly go through. Well, see, you won't fall asleep when it's cold. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 3, it says, "Know ye not that you will judge angels? How much more things that pertain unto this life? Is this when we judge angels too?" Maybe. I don't know, but it could be some other time, but we're given the privilege of judging angels. And Paul said, don't take a brother to court. Don't you have somebody smart enough in your church that can divide whether or not this guy's right or this guy's right? Don't take a brother to court. Don't you understand that you're going to be judging angels someday? And we're going, what? Where did that come from? It's kind of inserted in there. There's just kind of like a little nugget of information. Okay, let's go down to verse 15. And because it's so cold, I don't know, do we want to do all the Psalms chapter 2? We can wait till,
No.
we can wait till next week, start at Psalms chapter 2. This is
Yeah,
verse,
next week.
oh, that's right.
For 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah. Okay, any questions? Phil?
The rundown on the white horses, so do you think that eliminates the people that didn't make it into the wedding feast that got kicked out?
Ah, great question. I was wondering about that. I don't know. That would tend to make me think that, personally, I'll just tell you my own personal, because I kind of don't put any special weight either one or another. When he says he comes with all of his saints, I believe all of them, even those that are going to get cast out of the wedding feast, are coming down. All of the saints are coming. And heaven is empty. It's emptied of all of the believers. All the believers come down with Jesus. And then, I think, one of them that doesn't qualify to go into the wedding feast, which I don't think is one, I think there's probably thousands, maybe millions, that Jesus says, you're not qualified to come into the marriage supper of the Lamb. You go to the wilderness. Remember we talked about the wilderness? We can learn so much from the, is that kind of answering your question, Phil? We can learn so much by looking at the Old Testament and the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. Because when they came out of Egypt, they couldn't all go into the Promised Land. The Promised Land's not heaven. The Promised Land is our kingdom age, rule with Christ. That's the Promised Land. Okay, but some people are not allowed to go into the Promised Land. They were destined to go out and wander with Moses for 40 years until they died in the wilderness. Remember that? You will never hear that too much from anywhere else, other than David Jeremiah. Okay.